Hello, welcome to Lecture 1 for 4th CO 610, Ethical and Legal Issues in Counseling. And this lecture will eventually focus on the history of counseling. But first of all, please be sure that you review the syllabus, especially the parts of the syllabus that discuss the assignments and how you will receive a final grade in this course. I will create a separate video that will review that, and we can also go over those things again when I see you during hybrid week. Let's start with the definition of what is professional counseling. Professional counseling is a professional relationship that empowers diverse individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. There are several important components in this definition that you need to pay attention to. First of all, counseling is a professional relationship. While you are friendly with your clients and your clients will consider you a special kind of friend, this is a very different kind of relationship. It's pretty much one way, even though counseling is a two-person experience. So you will know a lot more about your client than your client should know about you. The focus is always on the client. Second, your relationship with your client is structured by ethics. The ethics that are found in the licensure law of your state and the ethics that are presented by the American Counseling Association. Our ethical codes form the boundaries of our relationship with our clients, and they specify specifically how we do relate to our clients so that all of the ethical principles are upheld. And we'll talk about ethical principles in the next lecture. What is the focus of this professional relationship? We are empowering diverse individuals, families, and groups. So counselors work with many different configurations of clients. And what are we hoping to do? Helping our clients accomplish their mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. So please notice that the focus is exclusively on client goals, not what you think the clients should be doing, but what the clients want to accomplish in their counseling relationship with you. In addition to the definition of professional counseling, we also adopt several attitudes that are unique to the professional counseling role. Number one, we follow a wellness model of mental health. Yes, you do learn how to diagnose psychopathology. But overall, counseling wants to be strength-based. We want to bring out the best in our clients. And even if they do have diagnosable conditions, which many of them will, we want to help them live their best lives in terms of living as fully into wellness as they're capable. We also adopt a developmental perspective about our clients. So your approach to working with a 7-year-old is going to be very different than working with a 17-year-old, which will be different still than working with a 77-year-old. Humans go through developmental stages, which means they have various cognitive and emotional capacities, and we want to work within the capacities that our clients present to us from a developmental perspective. Counseling also likes to focus on prevention and early intervention. So instead of waiting till things get as bad as they possibly can, counselors may actually offer workshops or interventions that seek to prevent problems from developing and encourage clients to come in as early as possible before patterns become well set and ingrained. Finally, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job by empowering our clients to solve their own problems. We offer them skills in order to help them achieve that. So these four things, wellness, development, prevention, and empowerment, are key to professional counselors and how we work with our clients.
Would you hesitate to get surgery from a surgeon with a medical degree from an unaccredited school? Would you feel completely confident driving across a bridge built by engineers whose degree came from a program that was not accredited? Accreditation matters. It encourages higher education programs and institutions that are committed to quality and continuously improving performance. There are two kinds of accreditation, institutional and programmatic, and they do very different things. Institutional accreditation looks at many aspects of a university or college as a whole, while programmatic accreditation looks at specialized and professional programs like nursing or construction. Programmatic accreditation makes sure that students in their programs are getting a quality education and have the required skills to enter their chosen profession. Some industries require licensure or certification from a program accredited by an accreditor. Programmatic accreditation agencies leverage the experience of qualified stakeholders to develop national standards and ensure student success. Programmatic accreditation works, and it works well. If you would hesitate to drive across a potentially unsafe bridge, you know this is true. Contact ASPA at aspa@aspa-usa.org to learn how you can support programmatic accreditation and help students succeed.
Now, all 50 states have licensure. In fact, one of the new things that's happening is called the Counseling Compact, and we will eventually talk about that, which is going to make taking your license from state A to state B much easier. And I'm going to back up because the other thing that makes a profession are national training standards. And in our case, it's CACREP, the Council on Accreditation for Counseling and Related Educational Programs. And don't be surprised if knowing what CACREP stands for is a question that might show up on a midterm or a final exam. Take note. You can go to cacrep.org and find the standards that your counseling program is now fulfilling, since we are CACREP accredited. Part of your education that is specified by CACREP are the 8 common core areas for professional counseling identity. And I've listed them here with the courses that are associated particularly with each area. The first content area is professional counseling orientation and ethical practice, and you are in the course that covers that. Next is social and cultural diversity. CO 730, Advanced Cross-Cultural Counseling, relates to that common core area. Then there is career development. CO 680 is the career counseling course. We have multiple courses in the counseling and helping relationships, and you can see all those numbers there. You are probably in CO 601, Counseling Theories and Techniques, or perhaps CO 600, which is Systemic Counseling Theories and Techniques. You either have already been in CO 655, Process and Skills, or are going to be taking it soon and very soon. 618 is Counseling Children. It's not listed in this category, but 617 is Counseling Adolescents. 660 is Crisis Counseling. 625 is Addictions, easy for me to say. And then 720 is, I believe, Psychopathology. Check me out on that one. The next category for the Common Core area is Human Growth and Development, and that's going to be CO 622. Group counseling and group work you will find in CO 675, Group Counseling. The area of assessment and testing is CO 715. And finally, research and program evaluation you will cover in CO 725. Work with your academic advisor and your faculty mentor to to sequence the classes that will be best for you. The counseling department, or I should say now the School of Counseling, pardon me, has specific thoughts on how to best sequence your classes so that you will be maximum prepared for field placement. So again, work with your academic advisor and check it out with your faculty mentor. In addition to those common core areas, KCREP also expects your program to help you gain experience and professional practice. Asbury has courses for that. CO 700 is Practicum, your first practice course. And then you have the 705, 706, and 708, Internship 1, 2, and 3. The list on the right that says specializations, you will see that KCREP has a large number of specializations, and Asbury has chosen to be accredited with just clinical mental health counseling specialization, as well as marriage, couples, and family counseling, and you are in one or the other of those degree plans. All right, after that brief introduction to KCREP, let's turn to the history of counseling. Counseling actually started as a new profession just around the turn of the last century. Counseling in that time took the form of basically advice giving and information sharing. It grew out of humanitarian concerns that were associated with the impact of the Industrial Revolution on individuals and communities, the emergence of social welfare movement that we now consider social justice, the opening up of public education, and the great influx of immigrants that happened around the turn of the century. At this period of time, the emphasis was on social reform and educational processes. However, there was no mention of counseling as a profession in the professional literature until 1931. Moving on into the next decade, several individuals pop up as shaping the counseling world as we see it today. Frank Parsons is considered the father of guidance. Jessie Buttrick Davis brought a focus on prevention and is the founder of the school guidance movement. Clifford Whittingham Beers focused on American mental hygiene movement and wrote a book called A Mind That Found Itself. Other things show up in the 1910s, where we see movement in education. So Harvard University in 1911 was the first university to offer courses in vocational guidance, because that's where the emphasis was on guiding people into the correct vocation. Grand Rapids, Michigan in 1912 began the first citywide school guidance program. And maybe you had a school guidance counselor yourself. The National Vocational Guidance Association is an early predecessor to what is now the American Counseling Association, and it was founded in 1913. It was the first national professional organization for the field of counseling, and it published literature specific to our profession. World War I brought in an emphasis on testing for the U.S. Army to screen its personnel. And so from guidance, a movement to psychometrics became foundational so that tests were given to see what job would be best suited for individuals. This testing lent a scientific identity to vocational guidance. And maybe in your high school, you were given vocational tests as a way to help guide you to choose your profession, or not. In the 1920s, what began to emerge were theories of education. Again, this built into the counseling program. In addition, the federal government began to use vocational guidance with war veterans to help them find their place back in society for when they returned from war. By the mid-1920s, there was certification of counselors in both Boston and New York City. Also, standards for preparation and evaluation of occupational materials emerged. For those of you in the marriage and family counseling track, you might want to note that in 1929, Abraham and Hannah Stone opened the very first marriage and family counseling center in New York City. In the 1930s, this is where we, in our country, experienced the Great Depression, and university and vocational settings did focus on counseling methods that continued to relate to employment. So E.G. Williamson, at this point, emerged with the first guidance and counseling theory. Before that, it was take a test, and we'll tell you what would be best suited for your profession based on your test scores. But there really wasn't a theory behind it. Williamson was the first one that offered and created a counseling theory. In this case, counseling was directive and centered on the wisdom of the counselor. So it was a top-down model of counseling. It was also a trait-factored counseling. What are your traits? And therefore, what job would be best suited to the traits that you bring to the table? The counselor in this case served as a teacher, a mentor, and was using the counselor's influence skill to direct the client to the profession that the counselor's assessment of their testing said the client should enter. Only then did counseling begin to broaden beyond an occupational focus. And by the way, at this point, there is going to be, during week 1, a threaded discussion related to these names that I just reviewed. So if you want to take a sneak peek, pause here, go into the discussion area of Canvas, and read the directions for the threaded discussion that is happening during week 1. During the 1940s, this is where Carl Rogers, a name that should be familiar to most of you, if not, go ahead and Google Carl. He began this emphasis on client-centered therapy. So now there's a shift away from counselor-centered therapy to a focus, finally, on the client. World War I unfolds. And then counseling, the government becomes involved after the war in pushing the counseling profession forward a bit more. This is where the National Institutes of Mental Health was established, the National Mental Health Act in 1946, and the Veteran Administration GI Bill funded training of counselors. So at this point, counseling began to move away from alliance with vocational development only and began to look at personal development as well. In the 1950s, we see much more formalization of some of the factors that make up a profession. So now we have the American Personnel and Guidance Association, which again is the next iteration of the American Counseling Association, APGA. At this time, the American Psychological Association launched its Division 17. We have the passage of the National Defense Education Act, and there is the introduction of new guidance and counseling theories. So now counseling is going to look a lot closer to what you will be learning in your counseling training. In the 1960s, this is where a focus on the development of the profession really began to emerge. Gilbert Wren wrote The Counselor in a Changing World in 1962, and counselors began to help clients resolve their developmental needs. So again, you hear that emphasis on development. The focus on welfare and social justice took a new turn during the 60s with the Vietnam War, the emphasis on civil rights, and the women's movement. So professional counselors have always been interested in social welfare and have been active in helping to create policies that would advance the wellness of their clients. It was during this time that humanistic counseling theories and group counseling focus emerged. You'll be learning a lot of those humanistic, well, not all of them, but several of the humanistic counseling theories in your CO 601 course, and you'll have a whole course on group counseling. So there was an increase in the professionalism of counseling in the 1960s. So our ACA Code of Ethics emerged, as well as the publication of professional counseling journals. However, a big note is in 1963, the Community Mental Health Centers Act was passed by Congress. This act intended to empty out the institutions where people were being housed who had supposed mental health problems. The goal was to create community counseling centers that would replace institutionalization. Great in theory, but short on money to make the community counseling centers a reality for enough people. Counselor education was now focusing on community counseling needs as a result of so many individuals who had been housed and lived their whole lives in mental health institutions who were now out on the streets, many of them without support from families. In the 1970s, we really see a rapid growth of counseling outside of educational settings. One might think about this as the golden era of private practice. There was also the formation of helping skills programs and self-help groups. But please note, another really good exam question, 1976, Virginia passed the very first counseling licensure law. And in 1981, Florida passed a Title Act that later became a Practice Act. Now let me stop here. A Title Act protects the title of professional counselor so that only those with the correct training can hang out a shingle and call themselves a professional counselor. A Title Act then needs to morph into a Practice Act, and with the Practice Act, the scope of care and the duties of counseling are spelled out within each state. So now all states have both a Title Act and a Practice Act. In the 1980s, we see standardization of training and certification of counselors with the emergence of CACREP standards, and NBCC is the National Board of Certified Counselors. They administer the National Counseling Examination and the National Counselor Mental Health Examination. I wonder which one is administered in your state where you will be seeking licensure. During the 1980s, counseling began to solidify as a distinct profession, distinct from social work, psychiatry, and psychology. There was a renewed emphasis in the 1980s on human growth and development, and during that time, there was a special emphasis on gender and sexual orientation as well as multiculturalism in the counseling world. Finally, getting a little closer to up-to-date 1990s. At 1992, Now we finally have a name change to the American Counseling Association, which represents where we are today. An even stronger emphasis on multiculturalism and diversity has emerged and continues through today. In 1992, counseling was included as a primary mental health profession in the Healthcare Human Resources Statistics, and actually, finally, in 2023, professional counselors were finally recognized as providers for Medicare recipients. By 1990s, there was 100,000 certified or licensed counselors in the USA. HMOs and the increased focus on legislation began to dim the light of private practice as health maintenance organizations began to put some curbs on how many sessions counselees can have. Finally, in the 1990s, there was a focus on spirituality, prevention, wellness, social interaction, and the emphasis on social economic status. Thus ends the history of counseling. In another lecture, we're going to be moving into the 21st century, but for now, we're going to stop right here, right now.